This is the American Forces Network, Europe. It's 10 o'clock in Central Europe. Reports of a B-52 shot down in Indochina are confirmed.
AFN News from the wires of the AP and UPI.
Good morning, I'm Dan Allen reporting. It's 11 o'clock in Central Europe. Two B-52s and an F-111 are shot down by North Vietnamese gunners.
AFN News from the wires of the AP and UPI.
Good morning, I'm David Mina. For the Apollo 17 astronauts whose spacecraft is hurtling toward Earth after man's last scheduled lunar landing for perhaps decades. Landing with their cargo of lunar samples and film is scheduled for 8:24 p.m. Central European Time in the Pacific southwest of American Samoa. The astronauts are now in their final rest period in space. Tomorrow, the astronauts will leave the pickup vessel Ticonderoga for the 30-minute flight to Samoa. From there, they'll fly to Houston later in the day. AFN's coverage of the splashdown this evening begins at 6 minutes past 8 o'clock. The National Center...
It's 12 noon in Central Europe. The United States carries out its heaviest airstrikes ever on North Vietnam and suffers its costliest one-day losses of the war.
AFN News and Sports Roundup, a summary of developments from the wires of the AP and UPI. First, the news.
Good afternoon, this is Bob Andresen. A moon ship comes home later today, ending a $25 billion program created to put an American on the moon first and carried on as a scientific exploration program for all of mankind. Ted Shields of UPI reports from Cape Kennedy.
The last Apollo astronauts are heading home, with Earth still distant but growing larger in the spacecraft's window every hour. They've been finishing up a few scientific tasks, mainly concerned with recording infrared and ultraviolet rays from distant galaxies. They also held a news conference for reporters on Earth at the Manned Spacecraft Center. Gene Cernan told them that the voyage of the last Apollo has been truly a beginning, and he was confident that there would be more manned expeditions to the Moon, to Mars, or even deeper into the universe. Earthbound scientists say the astronauts' discoveries may force a major revision in theories about the Moon. After 8 hours sleep, Cernan, Ron Evans, and Jack Schmidt will lash down their lunar treasures in preparation for a mid-afternoon landing in the Pacific. Ted Shields at Cape Kennedy.
AFN News plans live coverage of the splashdown beginning at 8:05 this evening, Central European Time.
It's 2 o'clock in Central Europe. U.S. warplanes conduct their heaviest raids of the war and suffer their costliest losses.
AFN News from the wires of the AP and UPI.
Good afternoon, this is David Elliott reporting. Team speeding toward Earth is heading for a splashdown in the South Pacific later today. Astronauts Eugene Cernan, Harrison Schmitt, and Ronald Evans are at the end of their last rest period. The Moon Explorers are prepared to arrive 400 miles southeast of Samoa. Waiting in good weather is the U.S. carrier Ticonderoga, prime recovery ship for the final lunar mission.
The closeness of the Apollo 17 mission and the time of year permitted a bit of Christmas buffoonery in the normally very serious Mission Control Center here. Jack Keeney, a public affairs officer who wears an impressive white beard, donned a Santa Claus suit and strolled through the control center dispensing gifts. The flight director was given a toy spaceship control panel labeled Skylab, a program which begins next year. The flight surgeon received a toy telephone labeled for private conversations only, a reference to the astronauts' secret discussions of minor health problems with doctors here at the Space Center. Other flight controllers received candy in honor of a sweet mission. John Pollock, ABC News, Manned Spacecraft Center, Houston.
Central European Time, 6 o'clock. America pays a high price for its latest raids on the North Vietnamese heartland. Hanoi parades 6 captured B-52 crew members. Congressional doves unhappy with the increased bombing. Apollo 17 heads for splashdown, and Harry Truman fights kidney deterioration.
The 6 o'clock report, an expanded summary of world developments, including today in Europe, compiled from the wires of the AP and UPI, with reports from the major American networks.
Good evening, I'm David Minot. The expedition ever undertaken is rapidly nearing its conclusion as the Apollo 17 spacecraft heads homeward with a treasure of geologic samples from the moon. The climax to the $25 billion Apollo program is scheduled for later this evening when the spacecraft carrying astronauts Ron Evans, Eugene Cernan, and Harrison Schmitt splashes down in the South Pacific. Weathermen at Cape Kennedy predict perfect weather for the splashdown area, scheduled for 8:24 p.m. Central European Time. That is, the splashdown is. For more on the final hours of this last Apollo mission, here is NBC News.
Joining the holiday spirit of their families back home, the Apollo 17 astronauts are speeding ever faster toward Earth this morning, headed for landing on the South Pacific at 2:42 p.m. Eastern Time. With them for man's final lunar harvest are some of the youngest as well as the oldest moon rocks, plus orange dirt believed to be scooped from one of the last lunar volcanoes. Astronauts Eugene Cernan, Ronald Evans, and Harrison Schmitt are following one of the most accurate courses ever flown by returning moon pilots as they head for the finish of perhaps man's last trip to the lunar surface in this century. Their farewell trip to the moon is to end 403 miles southeast of Samoa, and for the weather conditions in the recovery area, here's Russ Ward aboard the aircraft carrier Ticonderoga.
The Ticonderoga's weatherman, Lieutenant Commander Carl Hackey, says the unlimited visibility on this splashdown day should allow viewers a real treat as the Apollo 17 astronauts return to Earth. Only a few low scattered clouds are predicted at recovery time. There is almost no chance of rain. Winds will be out of the southeast at 8 to 14 knots. Sea swells will be running out of the south at 8 to 12 feet, but the long, gentle roll of the ocean should present no problems for the recovery swimmers. A total of 9 swimmers will be in the water for recovery, 3 working around the command module, 6 assigned to retrieve the 3 main parachutes. Yesterday, the swimmers spent much of the day on a final check of their equipment. The helicopters to be used in the pickup were scrubbed down, and the last details of the welcome home ceremony were worked out for the VIPs involved. This is Russ Ward aboard the USS Ticonderoga.
AFN's Apollo coverage resumes at 6 minutes past 8 o'clock tonight.
It's 7 o'clock in Central Europe. Hanoi claims it has captured 6 crewmen from a downed American B-52.
AFN News from the wires of the AP and UPI.
Good evening. This is Paul Macco reporting from Frankfurt. The homeward-bound Apollo 17 astronauts have sharpened the aim of their spacecraft for a splashdown with a 9-second corrective engine burn. After the brief firing, Eugene Cernan pronounced the burn right on the money. Cernan, Harrison Schmitt, and Ron Evans are due to splash down in the South Pacific 400 miles east of Samoa at 8:24 tonight, Central European Time. Waiting on station in near-perfect weather is the primary recovery ship Ticonderoga. The carrier reports gentle seas in its area with only high scattered clouds. AFN's live splashdown coverage begins at 6 minutes past 8 o'clock tonight. It's 8 o'clock in Central Europe. Everything reported ready for the splashdown of Apollo 17.
AFN News from the wires of the AP and UPI.
Good evening. This is Paul Macco reporting from Frankfurt. Apollo 17 reports all systems go for re-entry. The astronauts have performed a brief corrective firing of their rocket thrusters and stowed all loose gear in preparation for their return to the Earth's atmosphere in a little while. Next item on the agenda is the jettisoning of the service module. Splashdown is set for 8:24 p.m. Central European Time at a point in the South Pacific 400 miles southeast of Samoa. The recovery ship Ticonderoga is on station and reports near-perfect weather. As the final Apollo flight nears its climax, pilots in the recovery helicopters say they're going to try to pick up the astronauts in record time after splashdown. ABC correspondent Russ Ward has a report.
Commander Ted Dayhill of South Dartmouth, Massachusetts, the pilot of the helicopter that will pick up the astronauts from their command module and fly them to the carrier, says he'll try to beat the record 38-minute recovery time of Apollo 16, but only if the operation can be carried out with complete safety for all concerned. Weather conditions are right for a speedy pickup. The visibility unlimited, virtually no chance of rain. Winds out of the southeast at 8 to 14 knots. Long rolling sea swells. Water temperature 82 to 84 degrees. Air temperature in the high 70s. Commander Dayhill's helicopter will be one of 4 in the air at recovery time. In addition, 5 fixed-wing aircraft will be on station, radar relay and communications planes, and an additional rescue plane to be called into service if needed. This is Russ Ward for ABC News aboard the USS Ticonderoga.
In other news...
5 minutes past 8 on night side on this Tuesday, December 19th. Significant because it marks the return of Apollo 17 from the moon to the Earth. For more, Paul Macco.
Thanks, Chris. Well, in just a few moments, the Apollo capsule will be re-entering Earth's atmosphere prior to splashdown in the South Pacific, about 400 miles southeast of Samoa. That'll bring to an end the most extensive and costly scientific expedition ever undertaken, and the mission may go down in history as the last time man walked on the moon in the 20th century. Perfect weather is reported in the splashdown area as the aircraft carrier Ticonderoga waits to pick up astronauts Ron Evans, Jack Schmitt, and Eugene Cernan, following their 1.3 million-mile journey to the moon and back. The 3 astronauts are scheduled to be debriefed and will undergo extensive medical examinations before being reunited later this week with their families for the Christmas holiday. Before splashdown, the Apollo 17 astronauts are to spend a few minutes looking for a pair of scissors which were misplaced earlier. And now, in just a moment, we'll have our live coverage of the splashdown of Apollo 17.
This is George Engle with Merrill Mueller of the Apollo News Center. The last mission of the moon now in its final minutes. Command Ship America separated into 2 parts. The main cabin carrying astronauts Cernan, Schmitt, and Evans for the recovery zone. The service module discarded to burn up on re-entry. The cabin section should reach the atmosphere in about 5 minutes to begin to heat up. Then for 3.5 minutes, silence, with Apollo 17 traveling through the communications blackout zone. My colleague Merrill Mueller.
America is making the approach over the North Pacific just east of Japan, just southwest of Hawaii. The approach speed will reach 24,541 miles an hour, and the aircraft carrier Ticonderoga has launched 4 helicopters, 1 communications airplane, to join 2 other airplanes already airborne in a pattern around Ticonderoga.
We should be switching downrange for our first report now from the recovery ship Ticonderoga. We'll be picking up Russ Ward.
All the rescue aircraft on station now in the target point have been cleared to deploy swimmers as needed. This means 3 swimmers from one of the helicopters, the recovery helo, will go into the water to attach the flotation gear to the command module, assist the astronauts out and up into the helicopter for the return to the flight deck here. 6 swimmers in what is called the ELS helicopter, that stands for Earth Landing System, will be deployed in the water to recover the main parachute. 3 other swimmers are standing by in swim helicopter, a backup helicopter in case they're needed. And a doctor is aboard the recovery helicopter, dressed in a wetsuit with a medical kit, ready to go into the water if he is needed. So if it's an ideal pickup, 9 swimmers will be in the water, 4 others standing by, ready to go in if they're needed. We just received word. Separation of the command module and the service module has been confirmed. We're moving towards splashdown. Russ Ward aboard the USS Ticonderoga.
Thank you, Russ. We had that verification of separation a few minutes ago. It was a good, clean separation, a little bit louder than the astronauts had expected at the time they fired it away. Fred?
I think there's some live talk behind us from America, and Ron Evans has been chattering with...
maybe happy, okay.
That sounded like Jack Cernan. They are talking about looking for the ship to take course.
Switching communications now from the Hawaii tracking station through the Apollo range instrumented aircraft in the Pacific.
aircraft is about halfway between Hawaii and Samoa at about 40,000 feet. And it is able to lock on its own communications receivers. It's a bulbous-nosed aircraft with a special radar receiver. And it's able to lock on its own communications from America and then relay the voice and the telemetry to the Ticonderoga and to Houston through Hawaii.
Every once in a while, we'll pick up the voice of Apollo, in this instance in Houston, Terry White, relaying information along to us. Just a communications check with the Uriah aircraft. The communications are fine. Quick sketch on the weather. Partly cloudy skies out there in the recovery area. The report from the Ticonderoga. Winds from the east about 10 miles an hour. The seas running to about 3 feet. Water temperature in the 80s and just about a perfect position for recovery. The recovery zone about 414 miles southeast of Samoa. They'll be entering that recovery zone from uprange from the north, headed toward the splashdown zone and the Ticonderoga.
That was live from America. Everything is go on board.
A live report from America. Ron Evans saying that everything is go. Let's switch downrange now to Russ Ward aboard the Ticonderoga.
An air of festivity aboard the USS Ticonderoga. Just below us here on the flight deck, the CPAC fleet band entertaining the great crowd of sailors gathered on this flight deck to welcome home astronauts Cernan, Evans, and Schmidt. This 16-piece band is located actually about 4 stories below our broadcast point. We're on what is called the O7 level, 7 stories above the main level, which is the hangar deck, the flight deck, 3 stories above the hangar deck, and we're 4 stories above that. So we've got a perfect view for this splashdown. The few scattered clouds still up there. Every now and then we lose the sun, but that does not diminish one bit this bright, warm day in the South Pacific. A very gentle sea, the ship rolling ever so slightly. No wave action at all, no whitecaps. It's a perfect day for splashdown. This is Russ Ward aboard the USS Ticonderoga.
A full contingent of VIPs aboard the Ticonderoga, too. 3 senators, 9 congressmen, a couple of flag-rated officers, and the governor of American Samoa. We should be picking up Houston at any moment. Interface. The ship begins to intersect the Earth's atmosphere.
All 3 are trying to take pictures of the Earth's horizon. They're also ordered to take pictures of the re-entry when the heat shield starts to melt off and catches fire.
Fireball photos should be pretty interesting.
Roger, American.
Should be under
any second now.
in that blackout zone. Okay, okay, command. 3 minutes and 37 seconds of nothing but silence, waiting for some communications to be reestablished. Always a very tense period.
Okay. It should start.
And that's the blackout zone.
And beginning of blackout was at the predicted time of approximately 17 seconds after entry interface into the atmosphere, 400,000 feet or approximately 85 miles above the Earth. Come out of blackout in a total time of about 3 minutes and 27 seconds. Following reappearance, at least from the communications standpoint of the spacecraft, the coke parachutes, which are 16.5-foot diameter, 2 of them will be deployed by a mortar pyrotechnic device at 23,000 feet.
Terry White, a report from Houston on the progress, and now Apollo 17 coming through the atmosphere in the blackout zone. 3. You're listening to live coverage of the return of Apollo 17. George Engle with Merrill Mueller at the Apollo News Center. Right now, the ship is in the blackout zone. It's been there for almost a minute. Should be coming out of it in about 2.5 minutes from now and begin to reestablish communications. Those communications coming through the big Uriah relay aircraft. Red?
This is Jerry White in Houston behind us.
Aiming point, which is
Discussing the
1,044 miles downrange from the actual entry
discussing the
point.
landing operations for America and the recovery operations of the Ticonderoga.
Monitor system, or EMS,
White is in Houston, of course, but we are also hearing downrange reports from the Ticonderoga and from aircraft overhead, but well uprange from the ship. One is 165 miles north of the ship. Another one is about 1,000 miles north, and that other one is very important. It's called an Orion. It is following America down in this flaming dive with a radar dish hung on its nose. It's got a great big round flat nose, and it will listen for and be able to pick up and relay the first communication from America.
When you hear Apollo 17 calling Tycho, it will be calling the Ticonderoga. That is the prime recovery ship, the aircraft carrier. If you hear it calling recovery, that's the primary recovery helicopter.
37 seconds into entry. Less than a minute away. And hopefully we will have confirmation from the crew on drogue deployment and main parachute deployment, assuming that communication through the Apollo range instrumented aircraft called Orion.
That drogue is not good for some minutes. He's talking ahead of the timeline.
The Tycho, the Ticonderoga prime recovery ship, has reported that they have radar contact with the spacecraft.
Here's the first contact.
Probably a skin track of the spacecraft with the ship's radar.
Did you do a weather report?
Yes, I did, Red. You're going to check on the weather partly cloudy.
Well, used to be re-entered blackout, reappeared from blackout, I should say. We were waiting for a call from the Capcom.
And that was just on time, that reappearance.
Is everything in this mission?
Araya is waiting for the word.
We'll be able to hear that when it's reestablished. Right?
The Araya communications plane should be able to relay it. There's another communications plane. That sounds like the crew of America.
Is that?
Okay.
They're taking pictures.
PG's got a potential 130 to 130 range. Looking good. 3Gs. Right on.
That's live from America. The blackout zone.
They're coming up on their second maximum G, as they call it, which is, of course, the pressure of this flight down through the atmosphere.
Okay, what is up?
Ron Evans was talking about that earlier.
Okay, it's still about 2.9 Gs. There's some more pieces off the inside of the spacecraft. Okay.
More pieces off the left side of the aircraft, I believe I heard that say.
Looks like the ablative ship.
Got a potential 65. 8,000 feet a second.
They should be passing through their maximum weight load, and there is a report that they are 104 miles out from the ship. That doesn't mean surface distance, that means up and out.
And of course,
Triangulation.
they're on a trajectory that should carry them right now.
Deployment at 2 minutes mark.
Terry, what do we do?
Okay, about 3.1 Gs. For about 4,500 seconds.
About 240 miles an hour, and that's their descent speed now toward the Ticonderoga.
That's from a speed approaching 25,000 miles an hour at the time they hit the Earth.
That sounds like Ron Evans reading computer readouts to Gene Cernan.
Which is logically exactly what they'd be doing. sighting from the ship, but they're a long ways out.
We'll start announcing guidance termination in just a few seconds, in about 30 seconds. That's the end of the computer terminated dive.
This is live coverage of the return of Apollo 17 from ABC Radio News. The occasional communication relay from Orion. Sounds like turn-up. I believe you said it's in the last short.
That's 1.8 feet per second. You'll have to figure it out per mile.
We'll have to calculate that. That will have to be figured out, and with pencil and paper poised, we'll go ahead and do that. Meanwhile, we'll switch downrange to the Ticonderoga and Russ Ward. The recovery ship Ticonderoga, now circling, now moving in a northwesterly direction at 11 knots. The last report from the ship's radar was contact at 62 miles. We're awaiting a further radar report. One coming in right now. Samoa Radio 1 has confirmed. Stand by. We have radar contact, S-band radio contact from one of the recovery planes up closer to Samoa than we are right now. Standing by now. There's the sonic boom. We've just got the sonic boom, and hearing that boom indicates the spacecraft will come down very close to this target point.
Houston says they're on the road.
It appears to be an on-target, on-time splashdown. We still do not have a visual sighting, but we have received that double sonic boom. Very close now. Everyone looking skyward, waiting the first glimpse of Apollo 17. Russ Ward aboard the USS Ticonderoga. Still no sign of it. And it's on the drogue chute now. Main chutes should be unfurling in a few seconds at this point. Just a few seconds.
They will. It's going through 11,000 feet. Those main chutes will pop any second. They come out reefed. We may hear the call.
Let's listen for it. Call relayed through the Orion aircraft.
Here we go.
They're on the chute.
Still commissary down there.
Let's switch downrange now to Russ Ward. We have the sighting of Apollo 17. The module is on all three of the main chutes, all three fully deployed, and what a beautiful sight. We did not see it as soon as we anticipated because it came bursting out of a cloud directly ahead of the ship. But here it is, floating earthward. All three main chutes deployed, every eye on this ship. Now looking forward as we watch Apollo 17 dropping toward the Earth at a speed of about 22 miles an hour. Compare this to that re-entry velocity of nearly 25,000 miles an hour. There's been some deceleration for these main chutes. The spacecraft now dropping. The helos are in contact, as is the ship, and a beautiful sight it is. Those main parachutes are bright orange and white, alternating panels of orange and white in that ripstop nylon with 120-foot shrouds reaching down to that command module. It appears we can see the apex cover dropping in the distance there, although there is a cloud just below the command module now. That was the cover. An effort will be made to recover the apex cover. That's the cover that shields the entire parachute mechanism. It is descending on its own parachute now. The command module at this point weighing about 13,000, 14,000 pounds. Word in that all is well aboard Apollo 17. Terry White in Houston announcing as the chutes were sighted, a lot of cheering and clapping going on at Mission Control. Let's listen live now.
That's one of the communications planes talking to America. Cernan, Evans. That's one of the helicopters. That was Cernan, wasn't it? Calling out 4,000.
4,000 all as well. That's the last report.
Cernan also reported he could see the nose cone, the heat cone, going down on a separate parachute. This is something that we've always tried to recover at all the Apollo flights, and it did deploy very close to America. He said he could see it.
If he could see it, then the chances are they're coming down on just about the same trajectory, and the chances are pretty good they can pick it up this time.
Not yet. Identify the Houston speed up. Houston, Disky shows minus 1.3. Flat is minus 17.88. Launch is minus 166.11.
Celebration.
That's Evans reading out the computer readouts in America of its location.
Should be getting down there probably 2,500 feet at the present time. That's an eyeball estimate.
You read that out in longitude and latitude, and I didn't get it fast enough to compare it with Ticonderoga's, but they're close.
These cigars will be out in full blast. 2,000 now.
Recovery, roger. This is photo 1 minute mark to landing. Predicted landing time. Deploy.
Terry White in Houston, a minute to landing.
Photo is another helicopter.
The primary helicopter, recovery. The backup helicopter is called Swim. Tycho is the Ticonderoga. Those are the radio calls you will probably be hearing within the next few minutes. Let's switch back down range now to the Ticonderoga Reservoir that has the returning command ship in sight.
Far in the distance, the USS Camden. The Camden farther from the target point than we are, but the crewmen aboard the Camden, 800 feet now altitude, 800-foot altitude, as Evans, Schmidt, and Cernan descend to Earth. We're going to be getting splashed now in just a couple of minutes. All three chutes still deployed. The module just below the 300-foot. There it is. There's splashdown. Splashdown at 25 minutes past the hour, and all is well. We should receive confirmation in just a minute.
Right.
Great deal of cheering going on here.
Terry White in Houston. A lot of cheering going on at mission control.
Watched in real time from the recovery helicopter.
Stable 1. It's upright.
Time at 3:04:31 ground elapsed time.
Stop up. Mission control has been particularly happy over this entire mission. Not only is it the best and the last of all the Apollo missions, the mission control flag was carried up there and left in taurus-littrow. Here, communication.
This landing must be some 5 to 8 miles off the Ticonderoga, because there was a mention by Russ Ward that the Ticonderoga was slightly closer than Camden, the tanker that traveled with Ticonderoga yesterday and today.
And stayed around 40 seconds.
Camden, by the way, is also a recovery ship if needed.
Seem to hear some happy voices. Switch downrange now again to the Ticonderoga Reservoir.
The USS Ticonderoga now moving towards the splash point. We'll be getting word in just a minute how close the module came to the ship. We watched it splash. We have it in sight, and we've just received word the module 3 miles dead ahead of the Tycho. That's not quite the record that Cernan set on his 2 previous flights, but it's a close one nevertheless. The first swimmer in the water. The first swimmer in the water now. There goes other swimmers now. These are from the Earth Landing System helo. Their job is to recover the big 83.5-foot main parachute that brought Apollo 17 back to Earth. We have swimmers in the water now from the Earth Landing System helo.
apparently 4 of the swimmers now. That helo carries 6 swimmers. There are 2 for each of the parachutes. Their job.
Let's go back down to Houston now and listen to what's happening down there. We can't hear some communication relayed through.
You'll hear some live chatter and laughter. That's from the crew of America.
Yeah, okay. Making an approach to drop the third set of helo swimmers.
Suppose that'd be a little happy to be back if I'd been away from Earth for 12 days and 14 hours.
It's the helicopter coming in again with another swimmer. As Rushford just said, for the recovery of the landing system equipment, that's the nose cone and chutes. The astronauts are watching this out the window because they're commenting on it. We're trying to stay out of the way.
This is 3.5 miles. 3.5.
Our helicopter now 3.5 miles away from the command ship America. Bobbing along, pop up on the wall.
Yeah, 3.5 miles. Captain, whether he's not to do
Last radio contact confirmed 3.5 miles.
Yeah, this communication line, by the way, 3 choppers overhead at America. The communication is from the choppers and America up to a COD aircraft from the Ticonderoga, which is a communications relay aircraft, then to the Ticonderoga, then to Hawaii and Houston.
If occasionally it fades out, that's the reason. That's a lot of different corners.
TLS is over here at command module. Yeah, okay. I sort of want to push back to second pass.
This is talk.
All of these communications being relayed on the west. And to Houston.
The voices of the astronauts are in there at different times. And they're obviously resting very comfortably, tidying up. When they get aboard the carrier, the main thing everyone's going to watch for is whether Ron Evans is a little steadier on his feet than the other 2.
One of these sets of ELS swimmers to deploy.
Evans wore a pressure suit for this landing. It's nothing but a suit that inflates and holds, more or less holds the bloodstream in place against G-forces, and jet pilots use them all the time.
Good show. Still happier than a bunch of hogs out there. Stern and Schmidt and Evans back home on a fine landing, 3.5 miles off the Ticonderoga. Let's switch back down to the Ticonderoga downrange now and rush forward.
The recovery helicopter, one of 4 helicopters in the vicinity of the command module, reports it's ready to move in at any moment to drop its first swimmer. 3 swimmers aboard recovery. The first man in will take with him a sea anchor. The other 2 will take in a flotation collar. When all 3 get set to ramp, well, let's let the first swimmer in the water tell his own story. Lieutenant Jonathan Smart.
My main responsibility once I get into the water is to attach what is called a sea anchor to the command module, and that's nothing more than an 8-foot parachute on about 50 feet of nylon line. And what that does essentially is just retard any lateral drift of the command module, which, because of its shallow draft, is highly susceptible to rotor wash influence and wind influence. But once the anchor is attached, it essentially stabilizes the command module in one position and allows us to work around it far more easily, and also allows the helicopters to approach it without blowing it all over the ocean. Once I've finished attaching, then all I do is direct my other 2 swimmers in with me, and we complete the collar installation and the raft installation, and I'll assist the astronauts into the raft and from the raft into the helicopter by the net.
Lieutenant Jonathan Smart, the first of the recovery swimmers to go into the water. Again, these are not
the swimmers going after the parachutes, but the swimmers who actually go to assist the astronauts out of the module and into the helicopter. John Smart and his two colleagues will be in the water in just a matter of minutes. The astronauts report they're continuing with their post-flight check. Recovery now moving in. The recovery helo moving in. The first swimmer, Smart, oh, there he goes. Lieutenant Jonathan Smart of Massachusetts now in the water. You might be interested to know this young man is a graduate of Harvard University with a degree in economics. A product of the Naval ROTC. He plans to go back to college after he finishes his military service and study urban development. He's the swimmer in the water right now, and he says no matter what he does the rest of his life, he'll never give up swimming. All these UDT members for Underwater Demolition Team, all of them UDT swimmers, enthusiastic in the water and the job that they have before them.
Lieutenant Smart's conversation earlier with Russ Ford was recorded because Lieutenant Smart at that moment was rather a busy man.
Lieutenant Smart's also a decorated Vietnam veteran. Here's some talk between the astronauts and one of the pilots. Who's static up there? Is the report from the helicopter pilot to the astronauts that Lieutenant Smart has attached the sea anchor, which helps stabilize the ship in the water, helps slow down some of the roll, some of the drift. And Lieutenant Smart, the last thing he'll do today is ready to drop the stabilizing raft for the collar for Spaceship America. The last thing Lieutenant Smart will do today is put into America 3 gold swimmer's knives. These are a gift from the crew of the Ticonderoga to the 3 astronauts.
They, of course, will pick them up when they inspect the command ship America aboard the Ticonderoga later on. There'll be a little surprise for that. Unless, of course, we've spilled the beans. Very conversational tone for command ship America. Astronauts obviously in fine fettle, good spirits, well rested, and rather happy to be back, I would say.
I hope they've got an appetite. The cooks have prepared 35 cakes weighing 600 pounds.
That's an awful lot of cake. Of course, that's for the entire crew. They'll all share it on the Ticonderoga. Recovery operations continuing. Let's switch downrange again to the Ticonderoga and Russ Ward.
Astronauts Gene Cernan, Ron Evans, and Jack Schmidt report a beautiful trip. The 3 men still in their command module. Splashdown was right on time, 25 minutes past the hour. The 3 men still in their raft, or rather in their command module, reporting to the ship by radio. The module landed in a stable 1 condition, upright in the water. The chutes for guillotine, that is, separated from the module with no difficulty. The first recovery swimmer is in the water. The sea anchor has been deployed, and now the recovery helo is moving in once again. Stand by. We get 2 more swimmers now, and there they go. 2 more swimmers in the water, right at the command module, carrying with them what looks like a small steamer trunk with a handle on either end. Actually, it is the flotation collar for the command module. The next move now will be this collar put around the module. At the apex of the module are 3 flotation bags. Their primary purpose is to upright the module should it go down in what is called a stable 2 condition, that is with a small end down. They were not needed for the uprighting, but they are now being inflated. Again, that's simply a redundant safety measure should something happen to tip the module over, which is very unlikely at this point. The module riding quite stable in the water, the sea anchor deployed. The Earth Landing System swimmers, those 6 fellows going after the parachute, now have their 7-man raft in the water with them. We are very close now to the module. It's just off our port beam. 3 helicopters
helicopters in the vicinity of the module, one helicopter over with the parachutes, which are much closer to the ship. So close, in fact, that you can hear the rotor watch from the swim helicopter. Here he goes, right by, almost as if in salute. The rotor watch from 002, the helo that's serving in a backup capacity. Aboard the recovery helo is Dr. Charles LaPenta of Cleveland, Ohio. He not only is in charge of the Skylab medical laboratories aboard ship here, through which the men will go after their return to the carrier, he is also aboard the recovery helo, dressed in a scuba suit, with tank, with medical kit. He would go into the water if he's needed, and he's got quite a story of his own to tell.
After the swimmers in the water, they check with the crew and ask them for a thumbs up or okay condition. If there's any doubt in their mind, or the crewman gives any indication that there's a medical problem, the swimmer will immediately look up to the closest helo, which will be recovery, where I'll be riding, and he'll cross both of his arms. And that means the doctor in the water. And at that time, I'll be prepared. I have the equipment to jump into the water and make an evaluation. If I do jump into the water, we have an emergency kit and a resuscitation bag for breathing in the helo. This will automatically be lowered by the crew chief into the raft, and if need be, we can get into that equipment and use it.
Dr. Charles LaPenta of Cleveland, Ohio. He, of course, was not needed in this recovery process. He is still standing by in the recovery helo, which is very close to the module. The module very close to the ship. It's a matter of, I would have to guess, just a couple of thousand yards, less than that from the ship right now. Very close. The helo rotor noise you hear is not from the recovery helicopter, but from what is called swim helicopter. Swim helo is, in effect, babysitting with two of the ELS swimmers who have just picked up one of the parachutes. Three helos now in the vicinity of the command module. One helo just off our port beam here, keeping two swimmers in a 7-man raft and one main parachute company. This is Russ Ward aboard the USS Ticonderoga.
Attaching the flotation collar to Command Ship America now, Cernan, Schmidt, and Evans safely bobbing on the water just off the side of the Ticonderoga. A good splashdown and recovery operations are continuing. And that's the situation with the astronauts safely on the water in our coverage of the flight of Apollo 17 from ABC Radio News. Recovery operations continuing in the South Pacific off Samoa.
All that static you're hearing behind us is the line through Houston. That was a compliment from Cernan to the swimmers, and the remarks back, I think it was from Lieutenant Smart. We got the first team out here today, that's NDT-11, the underwater diving team. Got the collar secured, that's the flotation collar around the spaceship.
Shouldn't be too many more minutes before the hatch is open.
That's worth it. That laughter is from inside America. The astronauts are obviously watching the swimmers through the window, and something is amusing them.
They've been happy as clams throughout this entire operation. As
soon as they get the egress raft, as it's hauled alongside, they'll drop it alongside America. As soon as they do that, we should listen for hatch open.
I guess they take all the stuff later here, don't they?
Ward mentioned a minute ago the Skylab Medical Laboratory aboard Ticonderoga. This is something new. It is for next year's space flight.
They got it.
I got it.
was the white cover that Cernan saw falling at the same time that America was on parachutes, and it went by them, and its own parachute opened, and it has been recovered by another helicopter crew.
They've wanted to look at one of those for a long time. It's down to a fine drill now. These recovery operations have gone smashingly well so far. This one, certainly.
Swimmers in the water around the command module.
Very white.
Jumped from the recovery helicopter. Swim team leader, Lieutenant Jonathan Smart of Belmont, Massachusetts. Chief aircraft mechanic Terrence M. Moy of Newport, Rhode Island. And radioman seaman Roy A. Bueller of Carrollton, Missouri.
They drilled a long
Recovery helicopter is piloted by Commander Edward E. Dale III of South Dartmouth, Massachusetts.
You're wondering about that apex cover, why it comes off. It has to come off to expose all these parachutes. And this is the first time they've managed to pick one up. And we had a hunch, we reported it when it happened, that it was visible and on a chute. It's visible to the crew of America, therefore would be visible to the helicopter.
Should be getting a word that the hatch.
It has been reported that the apex cover of the spacecraft and all three main parachutes have been recovered by the recovery forces on the scene.
First time they've gotten all three chutes, too. They usually get one or two, but they've got them all now. Gus Ward was mentioning earlier this new Skylab Medical Laboratory, which is actually 6 examining rooms put together in kind of a trailer setup. They're medical labs, each one, but each one for a different
Certainly not like the quarantine labs initially for the Apollo program.
And of course, Cernan, Evans, and Schmidt face no quarantine after this flight. No quarantine at all. They'll be home for Christmas. They fly to Samoa tomorrow, and then Hawaii, and then...
All of the briefings will be held off until after New Year's Day. Give them a little time to get reacquainted with their families over the holiday season, so they can put that aside for a few days afterwards.
And sometime this afternoon, the Moon Rock Express gets underway, but we'll talk about that later.
A lot of happy talk coming from Command Ship America. Let's switch down range once again to the Ticonderoga and Russ Ward.
We may have a first here on Apollo 17. The astronauts themselves are reporting the process of their recovery operation. The men can see through the hatch. It was not clouded over by the intense heat of re-entry. They're watching the whole process and are quite delighted with the way things are going. Again, they have been on the surface now for 20 minutes. If they're back on this ship in less than 38 minutes, that'll be a record. But Ted Dahill, the pilot of Recovery Hilo, says we're not shooting for time. That's a bonus. What we want is a safe pickup. A bright, sunny day. We had some clouds during the 5 minutes descent on the main chute, and for a while we lost sight of the command module. We saw it high in the sky, then as it got to about the 1,200 foot level, and we saw it the last couple of minutes in its descent. A beautiful sight, all three chutes fully deployed, a gentle, upright landing for the module, and a very smooth recovery so far. The recovery swimmers have just sent word they're ready for the recovery net. So 001, the recovery helo, will be lowering that net in just a few minutes. The drop bag goes down first. That's, well, it's a parachute bag on a line that contains 3 life vests for the astronauts and a special container for a sodium iodide crystal. This is an experiment that is carried aboard the command module to check on cosmic radiation. It's very important to the success of the experiment not to pick up too much Earth radiation. They want a check on cosmic radiation. So that's why so much emphasis is being placed on protecting that sodium iodide crystal. The astronauts have reported they're standing by, ready for the hatch to be opened. The hatch will be opened by Lieutenant Jonathan Smart, one of the swimmers. First thing he does is pass the life vest and that sodium iodide container into them. The men put on their life vests over their constant wear garment. Will be be leaving the module, get into the raft, lift it up to the helo, where they will put on flight coveralls. And that's what we'll see them wearing when they get off the helo here on the flight deck. Recovery helo now moving in very close to the astronauts with that bag containing the life vest. There is a line that dangles beneath this flight bag and will dangle beneath the recovery net. Its purpose is to drag through the water as the helo moves over to discharge the buildup of static electricity from the helo's rotor blades. There is so much static electricity from those rotors that to reach out and touch anything being lowered before it's been discharged would result in quite a jolt. It would not be dangerous. It would just be a little startling, as swimmer Smart explained to us the other day. The bag now with the life vest in it, in the recovery raft. The hatch should be opened in just a moment. This is Russ Ward aboard the USS Ticonderoga.
I suspect that the 9 of them are about ready to come out of that command ship pretty soon. That's the astronauts themselves plus those 6 little mice who are coming back home there too. And they're a little bewildered about the whole thing. Fred?
Either Cernan or Evans just said, fantastic, I can't believe it. And what he was remarking about was the maneuvering of the helicopter to lower a basket. And despite a wind drift, the helicopter managed to drop the basket right into a swimmer's hands, right in front of the hatch window on America. They have not reported opening the hatch yet.
Expecting that at any second. We'll listen for it.
Yep, it is. Now, one swimmer.
Open the hatch.
Greetings from the Apollo 17 crew. Oh-ho!
Reclose now while they make quick changes and clean up a little bit, and they'll change again in the helicopters as Russ Ward just reported.
Texas Congressman Owen Teague visiting the control room now, shaking hands with management and flight controllers as we observe the recovery operations on the Ida-4 television projector in the front of the control room.
They put that picture up on a great big screen, and everybody at all the consoles can see it. And I would suspect that those consoles are fairly well deserted by now, by men who are leaning up against them and smoking cigars. Generally, that concern has dwindled in the past day or so. The congressional delegation of Houston audience was the Ticonderoga. There are 9 congressmen, 3 senators, general, an admiral, and the governor of American Samoa. All aboard shipway, along with some other celebrity-type people, and a whole lot of happy crewmen on the Ticonderoga. To get a look at the astronauts and to have some of that cake.
Main thing that starts this afternoon, in fact within the next hour or so, is the first relay of moon rock from Ticonderoga to Houston. That'll be done by a naval aircraft taking the moon rock into Samoa, and by that Araya communications aircraft we talked about, making the landing at Samoa to refuel and pick up the rock, and then scooting for Houston. The first moon rock will be in Houston sometime tomorrow.
That's the Moon Rock Express, getting up there. This can begin looking at the findings that Schmidt and Cernan made on the moon surface of taurus-littrow. There's an awful lot of it. There's a 250 pounds odd of moon rocks coming back. That's a record load. All the records in the world have been broken, and out of the world, incidentally, on this mission. 12 days, 14 hours, and a few minutes after launch, they returned again. A good, safe landing about 3.5 miles off the recovery carrier Ticonderoga on a warm and sunny day in the Pacific.
Incidentally, Apollo 17 left Cape Kennedy at a right weight of back 2.5 tons.
Not very much left of it now, but the astronauts are in fine condition and apparently in fine spirits, according to their conversation. They've been carrying it on and watching the recovery operations. Let's switch downrange once again to the Ticonderoga and Russ Ward.
The recovery swimmers now in the raft, 2 of them, one on the flotation collar. In just a a couple of minutes, the astronauts will be ready to leave that command module, get into the raft for the pickup by the recovery helo. The astronauts now putting on their life vests. They are putting a sodium iodide crystal experiment into a container so it will not contaminate the cosmic radiation pickup that the crystal was designed for during the space flight. They're also putting into place a thermometer, sort of thermometer, that will maintain a constant reading on it'll give scientists a reading of the temperature as it fluctuates inside the module during this recovery procedure. The temperature changes will be made as the hatches open and close. They want a good record of that temperature. Still in the module are 5 other creatures, tiny little pocket mice, about the size of a man's thumb, weigh less than an ounce. They will stay in their containers in the module until the module is brought aboard the ship.
Russ Ward checking us downrange aboard the recovery carrier Ticonderoga. 3 astronauts, the mice, an awful lot of moon rocks, all of it coming back from 12 days plus, 3 of it spent on the moon in one of the most exciting explorations in the last of the Apollo explorations. Red?
We've been informed that President Nixon will be telephoning the astronauts in about an hour to an hour and a half, not immediately, as is the custom, not due, of course, to any immediate pressures at the White House. This is a planned program. He has something special to say for the successful crew of America.
And he wants to say it in private, and the President will be making that call in a little while. Recovery operations continues. Cernan, Schmidt, and Evans back on Earth again from the moon. The mission of Apollo 17 is over. This has been a live special report from ABC Radio News.
It's 5 minutes before 9 on Nightside, and as more coverage is available, you'll be hearing it right here on Nightside to the moon and back. To repeat for you, the astronauts are safely back on Mother Earth at this point. Eugene Cernan, Ronald Evans, and Harrison Jack Schmidt. And very soon they'll be on the Ticonderoga itself.
It's 10 o'clock in Central Europe. The Apollo 17 astronauts are back following a nearly flawless mission to the moon. The Pentagon says targets in North Vietnam never hit before are being attacked by U.S. warplanes. And Hanoi's Xuan Tweed announces Henry Kissinger for charging that North Vietnam is stalling on a peace agreement.
The 10 o'clock report. An expanded summary of world developments compiled from the wires of the AP and UPI with reports from the major American networks.
Good evening. This is David Elliott reporting. With millions of Americans watching on television, the Apollo 17, last of the Apollo moon mission, has landed safely and upright in the South Pacific. Astronauts Eugene Cernan, Harrison Schmidt, and Ronald Evans returned to Earth at 8:25 this evening, Central European time, with a smooth splashdown in calm waters about 400 miles southeast of Samoa. The recovery ship, USS Ticonderoga, was standing by only 2.5 miles away. Its helicopters were hovering above within 2 minutes after the command's capsule America hit the water, and their frogmen were in the water to secure flotation capsules to the collars to the capsule. The spacemen were on the flight deck of the Ticonderoga in less than an hour, with the band playing Anchors Away. Ticonderoga was within sight of the America as Cernan made the announcement, happily, America is stable in the water, all is well on board, we all feel good, we all feel great. And the astronauts could be heard laughing aboard their bobbing spacecraft. Some Apollo command capsules in the past capsized on landing and had to be righted by flotation bags. The end of the Apollo 17 flight rounds out currently scheduled man-to-the-moon flights for the 20th century. But Republican Senator Barry Goldwater of Arizona says the Apollo results will contribute so much to science that the U.S. will be required to have another lunar program before the end of the century. Goldwater was one of 3 senators and 9 representatives witnessing the splashdown on the carrier Ticonderoga. Democratic Congressman George Mueller of California, also aboard, challenged the theory that the space program is declining in public favor. He says very positive things are coming out of the space exploration, things that are becoming increasingly recognized by the public. other news.
The last manned Apollo mission to the moon has ended. Astronauts Gene Cernan, Ron Evans, and Jack Schmitt have returned to their home planet. The re-entry and return of Apollo 17 went precisely according to the carefully laid plans. Less than half an hour before arriving home, the astronauts detached their service module, and only the small cone-shaped command ship America remained of the mighty Apollo-Saturn combination that left Earth more than 12 days ago. On entering the Earth's atmosphere, the spacecraft was traveling at 40,000 kilometers an hour. In 13 minutes, this speed decreased all the way down to zero as Apollo 17 came to a halt in the calm waters of the South Pacific, nearly 700 kilometers southeast of American Samoa. Just after entering the atmosphere, the spacecraft lost radio contact with Earth for a little over 3 minutes. This happens every time at re-entry, but the contact was restored on schedule. Even before the astronauts could be heard, the radar of the recovery ship Ticonderoga picked up the spacecraft peeking through the atmosphere, leaving a bright trail of fire behind. Coming at such high speed, all spacecraft appear like shooting stars, while their thick heat shield burns off to protect the men from the heat generated by air friction. Moments later, in full view of the color television cameras, 3 light parachutes blossomed against the deep blue sky, slowing the descent of spacecraft America. It came down through a few scattered clouds, and 4 or 5 minutes after the parachutes had opened, America settled down on the clear, beige blue waters of the Pacific. Or more correctly, touchdown, it was so smooth, was televised from a helicopter hovering above, the parachutes appearing like huge petals of flowers spreading out on the water, with the slightly scorched command ship America in the middle. As soon as the spacecraft was in the water, frogmen jumped in from the rescue helicopters to secure a big spacecraft-sized life raft around it to keep Apollo 17 in upright position. Then the returned spacemen were lifted aboard the helicopter by sling and carried the short distance to the deck of Ticonderoga for a warm welcome. This is Jim Parisi.
This is the American Forces Network, Europe.